Hello and welcome to Pikel's Picks, powered by League of Items. Build better, win harder. This weekend there are some huge Draftkings contests starting on Friday with the EULCS. First, let's get into how you can build a viable lineup. In my opinion, a viable lineup includes at least one stack. In League of Legends on DraftKings, the most common way to build a lineup is by stacking. Stacking is when you take several players from the same team or the same game. The max you can take from one team is 4 players plus their team. A two-man stack can be used to differentiate from other teams, but most of the time you want to go with 5-3 or 4-4 roster depending on what you can fit into your lineup based on the salary. The best reason to stack is because of the high correlation between teammates. The team with the highest kill total on any given day generally ends up being the best for fantasy on DraftKings. The last stack I should mention is the full game stack, where you take 8 players from one matchup and a team from a different game. It's kind of crazy, and you need the game to go to super late game and have a bunch of team fights, but it's a valid roster construction, and it has won me money in the past. And I'll give you an example of that at the end of the video, so make sure you watch until the end. The key difference between League of Legends on DraftKings and the other sports on DraftKings is the way that the salaries work. The favorites will have higher salaries no matter what, and it's much less correlated with how they normally score. So I think you'll have a better understanding once we start looking at the games, and you'll see, because every single team, the biggest favorite on the day has the highest salary for every player from every position. The first match on Friday in the EULCS is between Splice and Giants, so we can go lane by lane. Adewamne versus Ruin, Xerxes vs Joko, Niski and Betsy, Kabi and Steelback, and Kasing versus Targamas. And you'll see that Splice, every single player from Splice has a higher salary in their respective roles. And that's just how DraftKings decides to do their salary construction. Adewamne is one of my favorite players from Europe, but I just don't think their team is very good right now. And I think that Giants is a sneaky good option, and I'm going to try to put Giants players into most of my lineups. But if you think that this game is going to have a high kill count either way, you could take 5 players or 4 players and the team from this game. So, for example, if you like Splice, for some reason, you could take Adewamne, Xerxes, Niski, Kabi, throw Splice in there. And if you take a look right here, you have $5,966 dollars left per player. So what you're going to have to do is take a huge underdog. And that kind of limits it kind of limits what your options are for building a team if you want to go all in on Splice. So if you do think Splice is the best option this week, then you are going to need to take some players from Schalke, Unicorns of Love, and H2K in order to fill out the rest of your lineup. And there are a bunch of different combinations. You just need to figure out which players you like the best from those teams and have at it. So Pikel's pick for this game is a Giants win, and I think Betsy is the highest scoring player, shutting down Adewamne and Splice. I really don't think they're that good, and I think Giants is going to win that one. Next up, Rockhat versus H2K. This game is going to be a stomp. You do not want H2K players in your lineups unless you think they're going to pull off a massive upset. There's really not much to say about this one. If you think Rockhat is going to absolutely destroy them and have a huge kill count, then you can start considering putting them on your team. But the one thing you have to be careful for is Rockhat going out and playing a really clean game and focusing on the macro game and forcing H2K to make crazy plays. And the reason this is going to be good for them and bad for us as DraftKings players is because there aren't going to be many kills in the game. At least that's what I think. And the other thing is that since all these players are so expensive, it's prohibitive, because if they do have a decent game, like let's say they score 20 points each, since you spent so much more, it really hurts because there are going to be other games with higher kill counts, and you want to get as many players from those games as possible. Next up, Vitality versus G2. This is actually probably going to be either the first or second most interesting matchup of the week. G2 is the favorites on They're the favorites on DraftKings, and I'm not sure if they're the favorites on the sports books right now, but Vitality has a better record than them. The problem is I think most players believe in G2 and think they're going to have a strong second half of the season. So I would expect G2 to have higher ownership than Vitality. So the interesting thing about the game theory perspective of this is that Vitality, you're going to get a team with a better record at a lower price and a lower ownership. So they're going to be a little contrarian, and I think they have a good shot. I mean, Cabochard's a good player, We can go through real quick again. Wonder, Cabochard, Yankos versus Gilius. Yankos is definitely better, so they have a big advantage in the jungle. Perks versus Jizuki. Perks is definitely better. The bot lanes, they're pretty even. But this matchup's really interesting because I think Cabochard's a good enough player where he could actually beat Wonder, but we'll just have to see. So my pick is G2. I think G2 is just a better team overall, and I do believe in them too. And I think Perks is going to be the player of the match for G2. Another thing to do in this game is to do a complete game stack, because if you think it's going to go to the super late game, then all these players are going to pay off their salary, and you could make a potentially contest winning lineup just off of this game alone, and then pick a team from somewhere else. Misfits versus Unicorns of Love. This is similar to the Rockhat versus H2K series. It should be a stomp, so the same logic applies. It's going to be tough to build a lineup with Misfits players, but a little easier than using Rockhat players. So maybe there are a couple combinations that you can sneak into there. But for the most part, I think I'm going to stay away from this one as well. If you think that there are some really cheap players that you do like, then you could create a contrarian lineup, or at least a unique lineup, by squeezing Han Sama or Senkux into your team if you have extra money left over. And that's one thing that you have to learn, is how to pivot. My favorite matchup of the week, and the game that I think I'll have the most players from and will have the most kills, is Schalke versus Fnatic. These teams like to push the game to the late game and just constantly team fight, which is great for DraftKings scoring, meaning there will be a lot of fights and a lot of points. If one team starts to snowball, it could get really bloody because they're going to contest everything still. I'd be shocked if this turns into like a macro game where everyone's just trying to trade objectives and outplay each other with their mind instead of killing each other. One way that this game could get wrecked, though, is with Vizicachi, because I think Vizicachi is much better than Soaz. I really like Schalke. I think that the public likes Fnatic more, and that's just probably going to be my team for the day. Last thing is anyone stacking this game as a whole. This is definitely another game that you could game stack. So Splice versus Giants, Vitality versus G2, and Schalke versus Fnatic. They're all three good options to do a complete game stack where you take most of your players from this game. So I'll show you how that works real quick. Generally, when you're game stacking, you want to pick one of the top laners because there's a negative correlation between those two. So personally, I think that Vizicachi's better. I'm going to take him. Then you want to get all of the carries into the lineup because that's where most of the points come from a team. And then you need to decide, who do you think is going to win, Fnatic or Schalke? If you think Fnatic's going to win, take two more players from Fnatic. So we can take Hylissang and Broxa, and then that leaves you with 4,000, and then you need to pick either Unicorns or H2K to fill out your lineup. And you just need to hope that this game goes off. This needs to be a high-scoring game. And, like, sure, you could pivot between any one of these players, but I think this lineup is also just strong because if it does go to the super late game, then there's going to be a ton of fantasy points in there. Last but not least, let's talk about Pikel's picks. I think Giants win, and Betsy is the player of the game. Rockhat wins with Memento steamrolling on a carry jungler. G2 win with Wonder carrying through the top lane against Cabochard. Misfits and Senkux, easy game, easy life. And Upset is the highest scoring player of the match and the highest scoring player of the entire day. Thanks for watching. Let me know who you think is going to win in the LCS tomorrow, and good luck.